but I'm going to make a little change up on the fly here because there's something that happened yesterday in the NBA world that then took over Cavs Twitter that I wanted to address this morning. And that is the Celtics dumping a ton of salary in Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis to get under the second apron. Now, we could talk about those moves in a second, but the reaction to those moves from a lot of Cavs fans online was, see, the second apron's not the boogeyman. Look what Boston just did. They were able to avoid the second apron. They were able to dip under it with relative ease. It took them all of 24 hours to go from a team severely in the second apron to a team under the second apron. It's worth mentioning the Celtics saved $210 million in luxury tax money alone by making those two moves yesterday, trading Jrue Holiday to Portland and trading Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks. But Jason, I have some strong thoughts on this, but I want to let you go first. Does what Boston did yesterday change in any way, in any capacity, how you believe the second apron will impact what Cleveland does this summer?
No, because they're in a totally different spot. Boston is, and they've been, first of all, they've been a tax team for a while now, which adds to the complications. They won their championship first and foremost, and we knew they were going to do this. Like, they pretty much announced it. We knew going back to last year, when some of those extensions were signed, what was coming down the road. So this wasn't really a surprise. I'm not entirely convinced they're done. Why do we think they're done? Like, have they come out and said they're done? At this point, why not just go all the way under the tax? I don't know if there's a way to do that, but they need to sort of reset their tax clock. And so I'm not totally sure that they're done making moves and cutting salary. But the Cavs have not even been a tax-paying team one time yet. They will be next year. So they knew this was coming. Again, I've said this before, but I don't know why suddenly people are acting like they need to get out of the second apron. The Cavs, when they traded for DeAndre Hunter, knew they were going to be a second apron team next year, and they were okay with that. So, yeah, it was a disappointing end of the season, but I think they still really like their roster and still really like where they're headed. So it's okay. You can be a second apron team for a short amount of time. You can't be a second apron team too many years in a row. You can do it 2 years. You can be a second apron team for 2 years in a row. You can't be one for 3 years, which is why what you saw happen in Boston yesterday is what the Cavs are headed for in maybe 2 more summers, but not right now.
Yeah, that third year is when the future draft pick gets frozen, and that creates a whole different level of complexity in terms of roster building. But I think the part that everybody is missing, and I know you and I have said this on numerous occasions, Jason, the second apron, it isn't the boogeyman. It's not a roadblock. It's an obstacle, right? Like, if there's a fallen tree in the road, you can go around it by taking a detour, make a right, make a left, make another left, and you get around the tree. It doesn't mean the entire road shut down. It just makes it more difficult to get to your end destination. And in this case, the Celtics' end destination was to get under not only the second apron, but probably under the luxury tax in general. Why? Because Jason Tatum, their best player, their superstar, is going to miss most of, if not the entire season. So it makes no sense to be a second apron team for the third consecutive season, to lose a future draft pick when you're entering the season without your best player, a top 10 guy in the league. If the Cavs were so desperate to get under the second apron for the sake of getting under the second apron, there are a million moves to be made, Jason. They could dump Jared Allen to Houston for Jack Landale, right? Like, that saves them $9 million. They could trade Darius Garland to Portland for Anthony Simons in 2 seconds, basically what Boston did yesterday with Jrue Holiday. They could get under the second apron, but it's all about what are you trying to accomplish. The Celtics turned Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, 2 of the key players in their championship team, right, into Anthony Simons, who, just trust me on this one, Portland was very, very okay getting off of his contract. I know he's an expiring, but they're very happy with getting Jrue Holiday back for that. They turned Kristaps Porzingis into George Niang, who Cavaliers fans said couldn't play in a playoff series. So let's not pretend Boston got better. Right. Boston dipped under the tax and got severely worse than they were 24 hours ago. If the Cavs want to get severely worse and get under the second apron of the luxury tax, they could easily do it. But the Cavs and the Celtics right now have different end goals. The Celtics are not trying to win a championship next year. I should rephrase that. The Celtics are more concerned with getting under the luxury tax under the luxury tax and understanding their circumstances without Tatum. And they're saying, okay, maybe we do need to take a year off before we're back in that hunt. While the Cavs are looking at the East as wide open as ever, saying, no, we are very much in the thick of it. So they have two different end goals. The Cavs, if they find the right deal for Jared Allen, for Darius, for whoever, whether it's a first apron, a second apron, a third apron, a fourth apron, a fifth apron, a sixth apron, they'll go make that move. It's more difficult to line up the financial side of things, but it is not impossible. But I see people all over social media yesterday saying, look what the Celtics did. The second apron, it's just a myth. No, it's not just a myth. It does legitimately impact the moves you can and can't make. It doesn't stop you from making certain moves. It just makes it a little more difficult to maneuver and get the financials in place. But Boston made a very clear statement yesterday. We're okay taking a step back next season to realign our book so that we can make another push for it later when Tatum's healthy and Brown's still in the prime of his career with those two as our core. The Cavs are trying to win now. It makes no sense for the Cavs to do something like Boston did just to avoid the second apron. They are two completely different situations, Jason.
Yeah, I wasn't on social media last night to gauge any sort of Cavs fan reaction. That's silly if people are saying that. The thing with the second apron, we've talked about this before, you can't have massive holes on your roster and be in the second apron and have any sort of levers or tools to then go patch those holes. Like, that's the thing Phoenix found out the hard way. And people kept sort of saying that about them, was like, they are not a team that belongs in the second apron because they were very top heavy and they had a lot of holes on that roster. When you enter that high of a tax bracket, you have to have a whole roster. You can't have any glaring holes. And I know what the narrative is and what the discourse is around the Cavs right now, but they feel like they have a roster that is complete and can compete for a championship. And that's not to say they're not going to make any moves between now and the start of the season. But if they have to roll this team out there, I think they look across the board and say, we don't have any glaring deficiencies, which is why they felt comfortable making the Hunter move, which is why they felt comfortable going into the second apron and sort of starting all of these clocks that we're talking about, because they felt like that was the last big move. You can add minimum guys, but you're not going to have the tools at your disposal to go make big trades, to go sign mid-level exception type players who can come in and help you right away. So that's sort of the big restraints that come with that. And they feel like they're in a good spot. And again, not to say they can't make any moves between now and then, but if they have to roll this team out in October, I think they'd feel pretty comfortable with that. And I'm sort of baking into the cake here a Ty Jerome extension to where he comes back. And if they do that, I think they feel like they're in a good spot with where they're at on the roster.
Yeah, I'll say it one more time, then we'll move on. It is a road. It's an obstacle, not a roadblock. You can make moves. If the Cavs find a move they love that they think makes their team better, they will find the necessary means to make that move happen. Whether it's shedding salary prior, which I think they're finding out a little harder than it may seem. The Nets were the recipient yesterday in that 3-team Porzingis trade, Jason. They got a first-round pick, the number 22 pick in this year's draft from Atlanta, for taking on Terrence Mann.
Yeah.
And I think right now, if you were to ask 30 NBA teams, would you rather have Terrence Mann, Okoro, or Wade? I don't know what the exact number would be, but I feel like Terrence Mann's the best of those three players. Now, he makes more money. Granted, it was a 3-year, $47 million contract as opposed to 3 for 33 for Okoro, and Dean Wade has a $6.5 million option this year. So it's more money, but the going price to take on that contract is a first-round pick. Cavs don't have a first-round pick to attach to an Isaac, to a Wade. So it's not necessarily simple, but there are ways for the Cavs to make moves if they so choose. I just wanted to point out what Boston is doing is not compatible to what Cleveland is trying to accomplish. Cleveland is trying to go all in and win a championship next year. Boston is clearly telling you this team we had without Tatum healthy is not going to win. So instead of trying to pay this exuberant luxury tax, lose future draft picks, let's get under the second apron. Let's get under the luxury tax and reset our clocks. They're not apples to apples. And I just wanted to point that out Second apron is not the end all be all. It is not the boogeyman. You can make moves as a second apron team. It's just more difficult, and there are more financial complications involved than simply saying, let's trade player X for player Y.
Yeah, the Celtics are about 9 exits up the highway from where the Cavs are. And so you can't compare where the two franchises are at because they are in different stages of life here. And again, even if JT was healthy, I think they would have done this. They had to do this.
Yeah.
And that's why
it just makes it easier with him being out, knowing that you're missing the top 5 guy in the league, top 6 guy in the league for the majority, if not all of next season.
And I don't think they're done. I think that they're going to keep cutting. If I were them, I'm trying to get out of the tax entirely at this point.